Welcome to the real world. My name is Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us on this very special episode, episode 67. We're talking all about Killers of the Flower Moon and Martin Scorsese movies. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us. This is episode 67 of the Real World Podcast, talking all about Martin Scorsese today. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get started, as we usually do, with some movie news. Knives Out 3 is now in development. Rian Johnson says he has the premise, he has the setting, the whole movie in his head. He just has to put it on paper. Now that the writer's strike is over, he can start doing that. So we'll be looking forward to that movie coming out in the next couple of years. The King's Man sequel is now in development. It is titled The Traitor King and will chronicle the rise of Adolf Hitler. Also, The Blue Blood is the sequel to Kingsman: The Golden Circle. So The King's Man, of course, is the prequel to the Kingsman series. And we're also going to be getting a sequel to the mainline Kingsman Present Day series as well. The third film in that trilogy is also in development. The Traitor King is most likely to happen next, but The Blue Blood is also coming down the line. According to some recent reports, Disney is continuing their trend of live-action remakes of their animated classics. The next ones up are Frozen, Tangled, The Princess and the Frog, and Tarzan. These are all said to be in various stages of development. Of course, Hercules is the next one slated, which is coming up very soon. The Russo brothers are producing that with Guy Ritchie directing. Titanic is finally coming to the 4K format on December 5th. There is a collector's edition set, including ship schematics, a booklet, posters, over 15 hours of bonus features. It's an incredible collector's box set they have coming out just in time for the holiday season. So fans of Titanic and fans of the 4K format are no doubt very excited for this. All right, so before we leave movie news and get into our main topic, there are a couple of movies celebrating their anniversaries this week. So I had to mention both of these. First up is celebrating its 30th anniversary, released in 1993. It's Demolition Man. I'm a big fan of Demolition Man. It's a fun kind of 90s dystopian sci-fi action movie. Stars Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. It's really, really fun. Sandra Bullock is in this as well, one of her first major movie roles. Takes place in the year 2032. It's a really fun version of the future. It's got a lot of quotable lines in it, and it has some really quality action sequences as well. So it's just kind of a fun, silly sci-fi idea. Dennis Leary is in this as well. I'm a big fan of his. So there's a lot going on under the surface. Definitely a fun watch. And then celebrating its 10th anniversary is one of my favorites of all time. It is Gravity. Gravity was released on this week back in 2013. This one stars Sandra Bullock. So both Sandra Bullock movies we're talking about this week. She's the main character. She's in basically every frame of the film. It's really her movie, and she does a phenomenal job. I think this is her best performance she's ever delivered. George Clooney also shows up in a supporting role. This one's directed by Alfonso Cuarón, who's one of my favorite directors. He's only directed a few films, but they're all really, really good. He directed the best Harry Potter movie. He directed several other great films, but this is my favorite of his. It's a movie I've watched a number of times. The visual effects on it are absolutely stunning when you find out exactly how much of this is CGI. It's really incredible. It's seamless, and the visual effects tell the story, help tell the story. They're not just there to be flashy and cool. So definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen Gravity. I highly recommend it. It is on Blu-ray. I think they have a 4K version now as well. So definitely worth watching if you have not seen it already. One of my favorites, Gravity. All right, folks. Well, that is it for movie news. Now it's time to jump into our main topic. That is Martin Scorsese, this director who many know, one of the most popular of all time, legendary career he's had over the years. So we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about his new movie, Killers of the Flower Moon. And we're also going to talk about our top 5 favorite movies by this very talented director. Joining me on this episode, returning to the podcast, he joined us on the Indiana Jones episode earlier this year. It's my buddy Ben. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thanks again for joining us for this episode. I know we both got to see Killers of the Flower Moon. So we're going to talk about that. But first, let's just talk a little bit about Mr. Scorsese himself. All right, so yeah, Martin Scorsese. I mean, this guy has been around for a long time. He's an 80-year-old filmmaker, still churning out movies every couple of years, which is incredible. He's a champion of cinema. This guy, he just adores the art form of movies, basically. And so, he's been around for a long time. He's fighting for film preservation. He's a champion of foreign films as well, world cinema. He's a big fan of all kinds of different movies from all over the globe. He, of course, has gained notoriety in recent years for his comments on comic book films, which have been a little incendiary. But
Quite bold,
right,
quite.
right, exactly. So that's kind of kept him in the news. But he's, look, the reason he's so popular and why so many people get so worked up over his comments, I think, is because they know he is such a talented guy, and they know he is so passionate about, this art form that conveys the human experience to him. That's kind of the main thrust of what cinema should do. The kind of emotional, gripping, films that are about relationships, things like that. That's kind of what he's into. He's of course also into history, and a lot of his films deal with real history, true stories, biopics, things like that. He focuses on that a lot. A lot of it comes from his own upbringing in New York, in the 50s and 60s, when he was younger, and kind of relates to that whole experience. He came to prominence really in the late 60s, early 70s with the group of filmmakers: Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Brian De Palma, Francis Ford Coppola. All these guys were good friends back in the day. They kind of came into Hollywood. They were known as New Hollywood. They were kind of the new kids on the block that were coming in and shaking things up, and kind of changed the whole film industry really back in that time era. So he's definitely an important figure for the history of film. And I'm just so glad he continues to make movies. Seeing Killers of the Flower Moon this weekend, I think it might have actually been my first Scorsese film in the theaters. I was trying to think back. I can't really remember me going to see one of his movies in the theater, but I'm so glad I did. He's known for crafting very serious and realistic films, typically taking place in rather harsh environments, focuses on, kind of intense subject matter. And he's directed 26 films up into this point since 1967. And he has no plans to retire. He's got a new movie he's working on right now. And so he's going to keep churning them out, I think, and probably till he's on his deathbed, honestly, is what it seems like, which I'm happy for, because I think guys like this need to stay around as long as they can. Of course, like I said, Killers of the Flower Moon is now in theaters. So we're going to review that in just a moment. Any thoughts on Mr. Scorsese, Ben?
When I think of Scorsese now, I feel so bad that it's so late in the game that I've finally gotten into his movies.
Right.
Because beforehand, and I'm sure like you, I grew up with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, so I was in the Star Wars, Indiana Jones terrain. And it wasn't until I started taking I took this intro to film course in HCC, it was back in 2018.
Hmm.
That's when I finally like started diving into all the other movie brats. They were called the movie brats of the
That's right.
1970s.
Yeah.
I didn't know who Francis Ford Coppola was. I didn't know who Brian De Palma was. And so it was during that time I finally started watching, The Godfather. I watched Carrie. I watched Blowout. And for Martin Scorsese, I can understand why people admire him so, because he wants to keep things real. He doesn't want to go into the dream, fantasy, heartwarming realm, even though we all need that from time to time because we live in a depressed culture and world.
Right.
But I can respect that he wants to keep things real and he wants people to understand, everybody has a different psychology and a belief to things, and we can't ignore that. Even though no matter how hard we try to think like, oh, there's only one way of thinking about things and one way only, he acknowledges there are different ways of thinking about things. So the more I think about it, his films were the first time I started kind of like dissecting shots more, even though I liked how shots were composed in, previous podcasts with Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just with visual literacy, metaphors, similes, and through like body language, what are they trying to insinuate? So
Right. Yeah. He does a lot of that, a lot of interesting camera work. Yeah. Cinematography is definitely a highlight of a lot of these films that we're going to talk about today. So,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, great stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said, we both got to see Killers of the Flower Moon, just released this weekend. So we're gonna give you our thoughts. We're not gonna go too deep into spoilers or anything. It's based on a true story, so it's like you can go read the Wikipedia article if you want, but we're not gonna get into super into details here. But we did want to discuss kind of our reactions, I guess, to this movie that we both just saw this weekend. So for me, look, his latest film, he's taking on a long forgotten part of American history. And I'm a huge history buff, so I love these types of movies where they're diving into this very specific thing that happened at this specific time that a lot of people haven't even heard of. And so that's something that really intrigued me just from the first trailer. I mean, that first trailer was so well put together. Can you spot the wolves in this picture? It was like repeated over and over, and all these just crazy imagery going on. And so definitely was kind of hooked from that first trailer. Definitely one I wanted to check out. So glad I got to carved out that 3.5 hours late in the evening yesterday and got to go check it out at the local theater. So this chronicles the brutal murders of several Osage people that took place in Oklahoma in the early 20th century. So that's kind of our setting. That's kind of the whole basic premise of the film. The story is, like a lot of Scorsese movies, not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of brutal violence here, but it's sure to engage any viewer, who's into this type of movie. If you're into kind of murder mysteries, I think it's a good one for you. If you're into history, it's another kind of good angle to look at it. So I think fairly wide audience would enjoy this film. Clearly, the cast and crew are all experts at their fields. Whether it's like we were just talking about cinematography or the score, the sets. I mean, the sets are incredible. The costumes, every little detail of this, you can just tell is so meticulously put together. And Scorsese, he won't have it any other way, right? I mean, at this point in his career, he expects nothing but the best. And so that's what's great about a filmmaker like him or a Spielberg, these other big names. They can really get the best of the best to work on their movies, and that comes through on screen big time. So yeah, it's a really special movie. It's very rare that we get these kind of big historical epics. I mean, this is really, I mean, again, it's 3.5 hours, so it's truly an epic in its length and in the story they're telling. I mean, it's told over several years in these people's lives. And so, and we get, to know a large group of people over the course of the film, even though it's really focused on three people. It's a big movie in many ways, story wise, just the way it looks, everything. So very glad that we still every once in a while we'll get a movie like this out there on the big screen. Of course, I've got to talk about DiCaprio and De Niro. They're the big headline names on the film that a lot of people are going to be talking about. They deliver, I think, what could be career best performances. I mean, they just totally transform on screen, totally throw themselves into these roles. You can't really even tell it's them at times. It's really, really impactful what they did on screen. Their performances are nothing short of amazing. Lily Gladstone, though, I mean, she is just like a revelation in this movie. I mean, she really hopefully gets to do a lot more work in the future. I'm really hoping to see more of her because she really blew me away. It's kind of her movie in a way. Like, I mean, it's like I said, it's all three of them throughout. You're kind of following all of them, but she's the heart of the film. I mean, she's really what kind of
Yeah.
carried me through the movie, kind of the through line. You're really with her the whole time. You just feel for her and you want to see her succeed throughout the film. So she was definitely the standout for me. Tons of great supporting players. We could talk all day about, of course, Jesse Plemons shows up. John Lithgow, I didn't know was in it. I had totally forgotten that Brendan Fraser was in this too. When he showed up, I was like, oh yeah, he's in this. That was so long ago that they announced that. I totally forgot about it. So, just a great supporting cast. Even the actors that I had never heard of, a lot of the Osage actors did an excellent job as well. So just powerhouse performances across the board, beginning to end. Nothing I felt was out of place or felt disingenuous. Scorsese again as a director, he's one of these actors directors you can tell who really loves talking to the actors about the performance and about the story and really gets into it. So yeah, that on that front, it was absolutely phenomenal. Last couple things I'll mention here, then I'll throw it to you, Ben. A three hour 26-minute movie. The question always, I think, is going to be, does it feel slow? Does it feel boring? Does it earn that runtime? I think is kind of a big question on everyone's minds. For me, it fully earned it. For me, it earned it because, again, you're telling such a big story over such a long period of time with so many characters that it really warranted the 3.5 hours. For me, I didn't feel bored at all. I was, along with the story, into it the whole time. I didn't really ever feel like there was a lull. If there was, it was kind of necessary, to kind of slow things down and then pick them back up. It has that kind of feel to it. It is a slower paced film, I guess you could say. It's not like it's a quick moving movie necessarily, but never once was I looking at my watch or yawning or ready for it to be over. So that's, of course, all of that goes to Miss Schoonmaker, who's someone we're going to talk about over the course of this podcast because she's been editing Scorsese's movies for decades. And so, hats off to her again. And another thing I'll mention is the music. They're using some soundtrack stuff, some classic songs. They're using a bit of original score in there as well. And it just, to me, paired perfectly with the images on screen. I love it when that happens, when you really feel the movie. You feel like the music and the images go together perfectly, and it just gives you that emotion that the director is wanting you to feel. So I felt that was absolutely great. We already mentioned cinematography; it's just outstanding. So, I just felt that this was an amazing film. It's a kind of a harrowing story of greed and corruption and all these different things, but it's one that is very affecting. It's one that definitely stays with you. I'm still thinking about it all day today. So for me, it's probably going to end up one of my best films of the year. I'd have little doubt of that. And so those are kind of my initial thoughts. Ben, why don't you jump in and give us your thoughts on this new film?
One word, gulp.
Yeah, right.
Gulp. Yeah, from the start of the film to the beginning of the murders to I don't know, just the personal scenes between De Niro and DiCaprio. I think you know which scene I'm talking about. It was a scene I did not expect to happen in the film, yet it did. I'm like, well, that did happen historically in the
Right.
past. Nothing inappropriate, people. Nothing inappropriate.
Right.
But yeah, it was quite the experience. It's very rare to see films like this nowadays because we're used to so many popcorn action flicks and murder mysteries. We don't have those slow burning psychological breakdown movies that deal with hardcore themes of today. The themes that are explored, they explore greed, they explore racism. I don't know if you noticed that how the story first, it's not really a spoiler, people, but the way the story pans out first, you see a lot of the Sage tribe in the era, and as the film progresses and the murders start to escalate, the more white it becomes, and you realize, this is a part of their fear. They don't want the culture to change, even though the white men are going to come and take their land
Okay.
eventually.
Yep.
They also just explore the idea of how the American justice system worked at the time,
Yes.
and it was fueled by their depiction of racism
Hmm.
and how it worked within their culture. So yeah, those are the themes that I came across while exploring the film. But going into like the cast and crew, DiCaprio was good, De Niro was good, but the person who stole the movie and kept things interesting for me was Lily Gladstone. We explore the events that transpire through her and how she reacts to them. We see her pain, we feel her pain, and by the end of the film, we want to promote her pain pretty much.
Yeah.
Because this was a real story, and I can't imagine how dreadful it must have been to watch almost your entire family be taken away from you like that, all because of money, which
Yeah.
really is tragic. It's a tragedy.
It is.
It's a Western tragedy. That is what Killers of the Flower Moon is all about.
Yep.
Continuing on what I said about Martin Scorsese, I loved like his previous films, he put in visual metaphors like the owl. What does the owl
Hmm.
indicate?
Hmm.
The book with the wolves saying, "Can you spot the wolves? Who are really the wolves? Is it the wolves or is it the people outside the wolves?"
Yep.
So
Yep.
it gives you a question which you meditate on for the next 3.5 hours. Which, by the way, I thought I was gonna have to run and use the restroom during the middle of the film. This was definitely the longest film I've ever seen in a movie theater since probably Babylon, I believe. Babylon is slightly longer than
Oh,
Avengers Endgame, which is 3 hours long. But
right.
Babylon, by the start of the third act, I really needed to use the restroom for some reason. But for this movie, I paced myself and I was able to sit right through it until the very end. It wasn't until I
Great.
stood up, I was like, yeah, now let's go use the
Right.
restroom. But yeah, very chilling. It amazes me that an 80-year-old man still has the stamina which he had
Yeah.
back in 1970 and made such a gut wrenching, memorable film. It wasn't pushy, like
Right.
we could talk about woke culture and on a later day, but the woke culture films that like to push an agenda in
Mm,
your face.
yep.
This film doesn't do that. It only
Mhm.
honors history. This is historical fact that happened in history. So
Yes.
I love that Martin Scorsese he actually tried to go as accurate as possible by talking to people related to other people who witnessed these particular events.
Yes. Yes.
Sure that there was
Definitely.
no fictional elements involved, even though nowadays when you see a historical adaptation, there are fictional elements put into it in order to make it more enjoyable to watch.
Right.
So,
Right.
but yeah, overall, Killers of the Flower Moon, I did feel the pacing every now and then. I
Okay.
did, but by the wrap up, it was all earned. I will say by the wrap up, this is when I'm like, okay, I understand why you needed all these scenes. That's usually the case when I know I'm going to walk into a 3 hour film. As long as the ending is earned
Yeah.
and it explains why we had to see all these other scenes, I'm like, all right, I accept it. But if you don't bring it back into the equation, that's when I'm like, okay, you did not really need to have that in
Right.
your movie.
Exactly. Great.
Yeah.
Great thoughts, Ben. Do you have a star rating on it yet, or are you not sure?
For right now, I will give it a 4.5 out of 5.
That's
Four
where
and a
I'm
half
at.
out of 5 stars.
Yep. That's where
I
I'm at
would give
too.
it the 5, but because of the pacing issues, I just felt that I wasn't bored. I just was like,
Right.
right, where's the film going?
Right.
And
Sure.
you're trying to pull out of this, but let's get to the punchline. And once the big bang happens, I'm like, okay, let's go, let's go.
Right.
Where are we going? All right, all right, all right. Ending, good, great.
Right.
Bravo,
Yeah.
Martin Scorsese. You did not fail me like you've never
Yes.
had
Right.
every film I've seen.
Right.
So
Exactly.
four and a
Great.
half out of 5 stars is what I would give Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yep, yep, that's where I'm at too. Briefly, I guess we'll give a brief spoiler alert because I do want to talk about the ending. I thought it was very fascinating what he did with this ending. It was kind of a bold move. What are your thoughts on that whole radio show kind of recap, I guess you could call it, at the end?
It came out of left field.
It did.
It came out of left field. I don't know if it's because Scorsese ran out of money, maybe for some reason. And Scorsese likes to go vintage in a lot of his films. It somehow visually connected for me.
Yeah.
Like it remained vintage. It didn't like jump forward to the present day.
Hmm.
Thankfully, it actually continued that terrain because I don't know if Martin Scorsese was acknowledging, like in the 50s was when Westerns were big.
Right.
So we're going to do something that takes place in the 50s that was known for promoting a lot of stuff which took place within the time of Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah.
That's what I thought out of it.
Right.
But I actually I this is also a spoiler. People please don't if you have not seen the movie yet, please don't listen to what I'm about to
Yeah. Go
say.
to the
But
time. We have
I
timestamps
love
below so you can skip ahead.
I love that it was Martin Scorsese saying the final words about the film. I did
Yes,
like that.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
I saw him starting to talk about how much this story means to a lot of people
Yeah.
who know it and the need for people who don't know it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
I'm like,
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I was really pleased that he did that. And yeah, the whole radio idea, I'm wondering if, since the film takes place primarily in the 20s, 30s era.
Yeah.
If he did the radio show, because that's how most people would have gotten their news back then. That's kind of how I thought of it. It's before the days of television. So for
Mhm.
me, that worked. I actually like that. Spoiler alert is over. That is our review for Killers of the Flower Moon. If
Mhm.
you got to see it, let us know in the comments below your thoughts. Give us your star rating. Both of us are on Letterboxd, so we'll have links to those accounts below as well. You can go check out our reviews there. But now it is time for our top 5 Martin Scorsese movies. This is a difficult list to put together. This guy, like I said, he's done over like 26 movies, many of them Oscar winning, Oscar nominated. So it's a lot. It's going to be a lot, to talk about. And it's difficult to get it just to talk about 5. So we didn't share our list with each other ahead of time. We're just going to jump in here. First of all, with some honorable mentions. Ben, I don't know if you have any honorable mentions. I've got a few that I wanted to just mention because, like I said, he's got so many great movies, but a few that I really enjoy that didn't quite make the top 5. First one I'll mention is Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. This is a movie that is early in his career. I think it's second or third movie, and he just did a great job. It's a very kind of simple character study, really. It's kind of a road movie with a mother and her young son. But the performances are just fantastic. That's really what stood out to me about it. Ellen Burstyn plays the lead role. Chris Christopherson's in there. Harvey Keitel. All of them just do a fantastic job with their performances. So I hadn't seen that one until just this week. I got to watch it this week and really enjoyed it. So I had to mention that one. Also have to mention The King of Comedy, which I find to be a really kind of great, I guess you call it a dark comedy in many ways. De Niro is just very different in that film from anything I've seen him do before. If you've seen Joker, you'll know it took a lot of cues from this movie, King of Comedy, which is a great one. Have to mention The Departed, which I think is a great kind of modern gangster film. It's really really well done. Huge cast of just A-list actors all doing a great job. Kind of dipped his toe into horror with Shutter Island, which I think is excellent. Really like that, especially around this time of year. Everyone's talking about horror movies, and that's definitely one you should check out if you haven't. And then had to mention The Irishman because this is another epic one, right? It's really long. It really covers this guy's entire life. It's De Niro and Pacino re-teaming for the first time, I think, since Heat. And just, great performances. Again, Joe Pesci coming out of retirement to do this movie, released on Netflix. Definitely worth a watch. Big fan of that movie as well. Ben, do you want to throw out a few honorable mentions?
I do, unfortunately. I wish I didn't have honorable mentions because I
Yeah.
think they're all amazing, but I think one would have to be The Age of Innocence with
Oh,
Daniel
see,
Day-Lewis and Michelle Pfeiffer.
I haven't
I
gotten a
really
chance to
liked
see
that
that.
film. I watched from when Daniel Day-Lewis met Michelle Pfeiffer's character till the very end. I wasn't able to catch the opening because I
Okay.
was just coming home from work. My sister was watching it, and I immediately sat down Age of Innocence. Okay, let's go.
Right.
Really good. It
Yeah.
was a really good romance story. King
Okay.
of Comedy. I love King of Comedy. I think it's perhaps Scorsese's cleanest film I've seen. I mean, yes, there's some near violent moments, but nothing like super violent. At
Sure.
least not like Taxi Driver or Goodfellas or The Irishman or all these other films.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I thought it was he pulled off the comedic angle, which I can
Yes.
acknowledge he did good. So that Age of Innocence, King of Comedy. I'd have to go with The Irishman as well. As much as I like The Irishman, I understand where Scorsese was going. I found the film to be too familiar to one
Hmm.
of his other movies, which is in my top 5. I think you know which movie I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I respect the ambition, but still the de-aging for De Niro and Pesci, it didn't really work for me.
Right.
I would still highly recommend it if you haven't seen it yet. It is definitely worth your while. And if you need to take a break, you can pause and go do something, and then walk back in. You don't need to sit there for the entire 3-hour duration to watch the film. But
Right.
that one's good. I think I have a list right here. I made sure to make a list before coming on here.
I'll throw out another one of mine. I just had a couple more on my list. After Hours. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
It's really good. It's really good. You should definitely check it out. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of like just this guy has the worst night of his life, and it's awful what happens to this guy, but it's really enjoyable to watch. Has a really cool look and feel to it. You already mentioned this, but I'll bring it back up. Taxi Driver. Man, what an intense kind of crazy movie. You know, De Niro just giving it his all. It's a great film, definitely worth watching. Very psychological, definitely worth watching. And then last one is Silence. I really liked Silence. Silence is another one of these kind of harrowing movies, very hard to watch at times, but you got Liam Neeson, you got Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver, just all delivering incredible performances. Most of it, I think, was shot on location. Just beautiful looking film. Difficult subject matter for sure, but
Yes.
well worth watching.
Yes. It was hard for me to narrow down a top 5, so I have a top 6.
Okay,
I was
good.
putting a top 6 together, but now I have to get rid of one and put it into the honorable mentions.
Right.
This is really going to hurt. This is really going to hurt, but I think I'm going to be putting Raging Bull in honorable mentions.
Okay.
I really love that film. I
Yeah.
love the black and white aesthetic. It made it feel more photographic and
Yes.
documentary like.
Right.
I love Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci's chemistry as brothers. They were born to play brothers.
Yes.
I don't think they played brothers in any of the other films other than Raging Bull, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. No, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Okay. So, yeah, it was a great film about pain and the consequences for loneliness and making wrong choices when you're trying to escalate your career
Right.
to the level that you seek.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Great
Man,
film.
that hurts.
Yeah. I hear you.
But things can change. But right
Sure.
now, yeah, Raging Bull is off of my top 5 list.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. Well, now we've made it to our top 5. A lot of honorable mentions there we had to bring up just because, again, this prolific director is so good at what he does. But top 5, our 5 favorites for reasons we'll get into as we discuss each one of these. My number 5 is Bringing Out the Dead. Bringing Out the Dead is a film he made in 1999. It does not get talked about a lot. It's one of those films that kind of went under the radar, didn't perform well at the box office. It really, I don't think, got a lot of attention at the awards season either. So it's a film that's just very underrated, I feel like, and needs to be talked about more because it's a very unique film for Scorsese. What he's doing with the camera, he's using a lot of slow-mo, but he'll also speed up the reel and make it, very frantic. A lot of harsh lighting in this movie. It's about ambulance, a couple of guys that are paramedics in New York City, and all the craziness that they deal with. And Nick Cage is the lead actor here, and he gets paired up with a couple of buddies in the ambulance with him. One of them being Tom Sizemore, the other one being Ving Rhames, and they're both excellent in it as well. But Nick Cage, I really think this is one of his best performances of his career. What he's having to do, how he's having to behave. He's kind of staying up very late, and he's very tired all the time, and he's kind of having these hallucinations, and he's just going through a lot in this movie. He's dealing a lot with guilt. The film, focuses, of course, on life and death is kind of the main topic here. All these people that he's, kind of bringing back to life, and he's kind of getting addicted to this thing. And it's just very, very interesting. It's very kind of thematically weighty, but yet, it's a movie that's enjoyable to watch too. They also deal with themes of faith here too. So there's a lot going on in this movie. Again, what he's doing visually is just very unique, kind of almost experimental in many ways. But it's a very thoughtful film, very thought-provoking, even though it can be very disorienting at the same time. So a lot of interesting kind of dichotomies going on in this movie. Have you had a chance to see this one?
No, but I've heard of it. Heard of it. That's like the only Nicolas Cage movie he did with Scorsese.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. It's one that I watched when we did our Nick Cage podcast a few months back for the first time. And it's just a movie that, another one of those that kind of stays with you just because of what it's dealing with. And The way it's all shot. So yeah, that one had to make the list, and it made number 5.
Awesome. Awesome.
All righty, so that is my number 5 pick. Ben, what do you got at your number 5?
This is hard. This is really, really hard. But as of right now, and this doesn't mean anything because I still think it was a great movie and I'm happy that I was able to watch it. But as of right now, my number 5 is Killers of the Flower Moon.
Wow, okay, great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, but I think these other four they cling to me more than Killers of the Flower Moon did, even though that doesn't mean it was a bad movie. I agree with you. It is perhaps one of the best films of 2023 for sure, and
Oh
it
yeah.
will definitely get a couple of Oscar nods. If it doesn't get any Oscar nods, then I will go and riot. But yes, number 5 is Killers of the Flower Moon.
Great pick. Yeah, we already basically reviewed it, so you don't have to get too much into detail. But yeah, excellent pick. Yeah, I definitely considered it. This is probably my number 6. If I was doing a top, 10 or whatever list,
Okay.
that would be very high up there for sure. So yeah, great pick.
Oh, so this new movie's not in your top 5.
It's not. It's not. Didn't quite make
Okay.
it. Yeah. Yeah. It
Oh,
would be
okay.
just outside. It would be just outside for me.
Okay.
Great. Well, let's move on to my number 4. This one is a movie that's synonymous with Scorsese. It might be his most popular film. It is Goodfellas. Goodfellas, released in 1990. Kind of the culmination of his career up to that point, I feel like. It's, like I said, to this day, probably his most popular movie. It kind of combines everything Scorsese's great at, right? It's like New York City, gangsters. It's a true story on top of that. He's working, of course, with De Niro again, who I think they've worked now after Killers of the Flower Moon. I think I saw 10 times over the past 50 years, which is incredible. But he's playing more of a supporting role here. It's really Ray Liotta's movie. He plays Henry Hill, real life gangster, gotten involved with the mob, and just the things he witnessed, the things he got involved with, the things he experienced. It's really an incredible true story. Of course, Joe Pesci here is a standout, as I think he always is in anything he's in. He's just got such a specific look and way of speaking, and his acting is just so on point every time. He's one of those loose cannons that you never know what he's going to do, especially in this movie. And so, superb cast. All the casting is great. All the actors do a fine job. It's one of those films that I was listening to the commentary on this Blu-ray, and Scorsese is such a meticulous planner of these films. He plans out such details, what the camera's going to do, what the actors are going to do, what they're going to say. He co-writes many of his movies, and he does that because he has a clear vision in his head of obviously what he wants to see, but he also loves improv. He really loves on set to find new things to do with the actors. So he really prepares extensively so that they can kind of get the shot he wants out of the way and then do a few more takes with the actors kind of doing what they want to do. And so that creates a lot of fun moments and memorable moments, I think. And that's, definitely a strength of any director is collaboration, right? So that's, I think, evident here because it all feels so natural. Great pacing. It's a lot of Scorsese's movies are longer. This one's over 2 hours but it's very well paced. It has great editing. The soundtrack, of course, is iconic. Great use of music, pop music, and different things like that. It's a very high energy movie. There's not a lot of lulls in this film. It's really kind of, you're seeing Henry Hill's whole life, and it's just kind of unfolding before you rather quickly. So it's a movie that definitely keeps my attention anytime I put it on. It's one that I really enjoy watching. It's funny because it deals with such crazy violence and like intensity, but it's really funny too. It's like got a lot of laugh out loud moments in it. Great dialogue. So yeah, it's one that obviously had to be in the top 5. It was just a matter of where it was going to go. It was really close between this and my number 3. This was almost at 3, and my number 3 just barely is above it for me. This one, I had to mention the long oneer. I think it's a 4-minute oneer he does under the club when Henry Hill and his wife go into the nightclub and through the back
Yes.
into the kitchen. It's just such a great
That one
shot.
take. is the
Ah,
best take out of the
yes.
entire film, for
That's
sure.
incredible. Tells a whole
Yeah.
story, going through there. So yeah, I had to bring that up. But yeah, Goodfellas is an all-timer. So that one definitely had to make the list. Again, it ended up at number 4. Ben, what do you have at your number 4?
So for my number 4, I picked Silence.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I purchased it about a week ago. I've been looking
Okay.
for this film for like the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Had no luck.
Hmm.
Found it at FYE.
Oh,
Didn't
cool.
care what the price was. I immediately grabbed it, watched it that night. Nobody I know describes this picture as this particular genre, but I actually do consider it a horror film.
Sure. Oh, I
I
can see
think it's a
that.
horror
Yeah, I
film.
could see
Just
that for
the
sure.
level of persecution which takes place in 17th century Japan, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it
And
is.
it makes you really question your faith as to whether or not
Right.
I didn't realize this first watching it because at first I actually hated it. The
Yeah.
ending I was just like, I hate this movie so much, but then at the end I had to like sit down
Hmm.
and contemplate like why am I still thinking about this movie if I hate it?
Right,
So
right.
but the more I think about it, it made me realize, you know what, the thing about faith and the problem nowadays is how people communicate when it comes to faith. Because if
Yeah.
you communicate things in a particular way, which other people consider what your communication to be something else,
Yeah,
that creates an entirely different problem. So
totally.
as soon as I realized that, I'm like, oh, that's what
Yep.
Scorsese was trying to talk about. He's not trying to offend you head on. He's trying to let you know, yes, he gets you, but the
Yeah.
way people interpret it is completely different. The way things are branched out, my brain just blew up
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
But
It's great.
yeah, I love how deep it goes into exploring faith. The
Hmm.
performances of Andrew Garfield, Adam Driver, and Liam Neeson, I think, were Oscar worthy, but for some reason, none of them got nominated, which
Yeah.
angers me. So
I know. It's
I
shocking.
love how Scorsese honors the great Akira Kurosawa in some of his shots. I don't know if you tell, but there are moments he definitely took from Rashomon.
Yes.
Definitely from Rashomon during the most pivotal scenes where they're asking the Japanese inquisitors are asking him about his faith and his background and how it brings only trouble to Japan. So
Mm, right. Yeah, absolutely.
yes, so yeah, number 4 is definitely Silence.
Great, great pick. I'm glad you brought it up. Like I said, is in my honorable mentions. It's another one that if we were doing a top 10, it would definitely be in there. It's way up high on my list. It's a very impactful movie. Like you said, it is one you continue to think about after you watch it because it's another one that the characters go through a lot, and it's another
Mhm.
one based on actual events. These things actually happened. These people actually got treated this way, and yeah, it's definitely leaves you with a lot to ruminate on afterwards.
Mhm.
So great pick, great pick. All right, jumping into my number 3. Again, this one barely edged out Goodfellas. It is 2004's The Aviator. The
Ah.
Aviator, I find to be an incredible, enrapturing biopic. It's a movie that just grabbed me and did not let go. It's one of those, kind of another big epic film. I think it's pretty close to 3 hours long. It's got, some intense drama. It's very romantic as well. Yet it's got some very disturbing moments too. So it's kind of
Mhm.
got a little bit of everything in it. This is the film in which Scorsese chronicles the life of Howard Hughes, very important American historical figure, an entrepreneur, an inventor, just an incredible
Germaphobe.
guy. What's that?
Germaphobe.
Germaphobe. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very strange guy. Ended up being very strange towards the end of his life. Yeah, it's one of these. It again kind of combines things that Scorsese does earlier with things like Taxi Driver, and that how it's psychologically driven. You're really getting
Mhm.
into the head of this guy and how his mind works. It's just a very unique film. DiCaprio, this might be my favorite of all his performances. Honestly, it's just so out there, and like all the things that he has to do is so interesting. Just his physical transformation throughout the film, and the way he interacts with the other actors. Kate Blanchett, I think, is another one of her greatest roles. She's playing Katharine Hepburn here, and she just nails the accent. She nails the mannerisms. Just all of it is just so perfect. And yeah, it's just a film that has so many, you know, memorable shots in it, memorable performances. It's another one that kind of stays with you, and you kind of makes you kind of, you know, think a lot about, you know, your own life and your own interactions with people around you. And you know, kind of, you really, I don't know if you could say you fully relate to Howard Hughes in the movie, but you kind of gain an understanding of kind of who he was and what he did, and why he was the way he was a little bit. So excellent movie. Another one that, again, I feel like doesn't get a lot of attention, that I think is definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it. Again, if you're like me, you're into history and this kind of stuff. You know, he was involved in the film industry. Obviously, he dated Katharine Hepburn, so there's that kind of element to it as well. This kind of like old Hollywood stuff going on, which is kind of fun in the background. So all those elements kind of come together in this movie to make one of my favorites from this director. So yeah, that made number 3 for me. Ben, what do you have at your number 3?
My number 3 is The Gangs of New York.
Oh, excellent.
There is nothing about this movie I didn't like. I thought it was brilliantly paced. Daniel Day-Lewis, it makes me sad he's retired now.
Yeah, I
It
know.
makes me so sad. His performance steals every single scene he's in. He gives 100% efficiency, and every role I've seen him do, he always is doing something different. He's not following a particular trope like Robert De Niro or Leonardo DiCaprio. No offense. I feel like they follow a particular trope throughout their career. Daniel Day-Lewis wants to do everything different every single time. Always different.
Yeah.
That's why I think he's among the greatest actors of
Sure.
our generation.
Absolutely.
Yes, Daniel Day-Lewis. I think the set design really showed this time around through New York. I know, like you said, Martin Scorsese is very meticulous. He likes to plan things out and make things look as real and grounded as possible. And he does show it in Killers of the Flower Moon and in Silence, but the level he goes with Gangs of New York, in my opinion, was the greatest on a set design note.
Right.
But yeah, set design, Daniel Day-Lewis. I love how the film explores, you know, it's a story about revenge, but by the middle of the film, you see Leonardo DiCaprio's morals start to like shift a little bit. He starts to actually care for the person that he's trying to kill, and then he pulls himself away and beats himself up like, what the heck are you doing, man?
Right.
This guy is evil.
Yeah.
You need to kill him. So
Yeah.
yes, it's great. I love how it explores immigration, the power vacuum, and how loyalties can challenge your conviction. And I love how operatic the cinematography was. Like, it felt like a theatrical, grand piece and not a personal, psychological piece like his usual films. That's why I love the way it's presented.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great points. That's a film I've only seen once. I definitely enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it as much as, you know, some of these that we're talking about now. Definitely one I want to rewatch though, because it is pretty brutal and intense.
Yes,
You know,
it is.
It gets very violent. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. I mean, like you said, the sets and everything, it just totally transports you back in time. The performances across the board are stellar.
Yes.
I that's the one with Cameron Diaz is in that, right?
Yes.
I think
With
she
an
was the
Irish
weak point
accent.
maybe for me. Yeah, she might have been the weak point. I don't think she's terrible. I think she's very good in everything she does. Just felt a little out of place for me for some reason. I don't know why, but maybe I just need to rewatch it. But yeah, excellent film. You know, like I said, he really hasn't made a bad one. I don't think I've given any of his films a negative review ever. So even like the ones that I only give like, you know, the lowest rating I think is like 3.5 stars still, which is a great rating. So yeah, excellent choice. Really glad you brought that one in. We're moving on to my number 2 now. Top two rated Martin Scorsese films. These are some of my favorite films ever made, honestly. I mean, they're both 5-star movies. They're absolutely incredible. But at the number 2 spot, I ended up putting in Hugo. I am a massive fan of Hugo. I rewatched it again this week. This may be the film of his that I've seen the most. It's his only film that's rated PG, so the whole family can watch it, which is great. But it's a film that is so interesting on so many levels because he's really blending real history with a kind of fantasy story, essentially, which is really interesting and really different. So it's definitely him branching out and doing something very unique for his career, not just the family oriented kind of PG rating, but also what he's doing with the story itself. It's really all about cinema. I mean, the whole movie is about the early days of filmmaking. Ben Kingsley plays Georges Méliès, who is a French filmmaker and just was a kind of a pioneer, really, of the cinematic art form. He really does a great job telling the story of this young boy Hugo, who's gone through many tragedies in his life, losing his parents, losing his uncle. He's an orphan now, living on his own, and it's one of these stories that has been told many times throughout history. This kind of classic mythological tale of kind of an older figure who's kind of lost his way, really, and a younger character, a heroic character who comes in and kind of leads that character back towards the light, if you will, or whatever you want to call it. So it's one of these classic stories. Asa Butterfield does a fantastic job. He's a really great young actor I've seen in many films that I really enjoyed. Chloe Grace Moretz, who's one of my favorite working actresses still to this day. Everything she does, I think, is great. She's wonderful here. So it's got a great cast. Sacha Baron Cohen shows up, and one of my favorite roles he's ever played for sure. And it just does a great job of visually telling the story. I've actually got it on right now in the background with the sound off because I just like looking at these images. It looks beautiful. The cinematography here, I think, is on another level, really. I mean, the way he's moving the camera. It was shot in 3D. So if you got a chance to see it in 3D, it looked amazing. Still looks amazing even without the 3D. But I think his thinking going into it, knowing he was going to shoot it in 3D, really made him take extra effort on the cinematography and really set up interesting shots. Great, depth of field, great kind of just, again, camera movement and the thing he does with the lighting, the way he sets certain things up, locations he's shooting at. All these things are just really, really beautiful to look at. Just has a great look about it. Very special movie for me. Great music. Again, it's kind of just a love letter to movies is kind of how I would describe it to sum it up. It was released back in 2011. Like I said, I've seen it numerous times since then, and always have a great time watching it. So that ended up at number 2.
I feel bad now. I still have not seen Hugo.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
Hugo, and Aviator, and Shutter Island. I need to see these
Okay.
movies.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I need to see these movies. I'm gonna
Definitely.
get to them. I'm gonna get to them.
Yes, you'll get there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're at your number 2, Ben. What do you have at the number 2 spot?
All right. So number 2 is actually I consider it Martin Scorsese's feel-good movie.
Okay.
Because I think it's super, super funny, very energetic. And like you said earlier, I just love the tracking shots in this film. It's Goodfellas. I love Goodfellas. I just think it's a great ride. And there's never was a point through the watch where I found myself getting bored or contemplating what I'm watching. I was just engaged from start to finish. I love the narrations from Ray Liotta.
Yeah.
And I forgot the actress who plays his wife. What's her name?
Oh, yes. Oh man, what is her name? Let me look it
Yes.
up real quick because we gotta mention her because she is so good in it.
Yes, she is. She's fantastic.
Lorraine Bracco.
Lorraine Bracco. Yeah, their narrations and their execution of their portrayals was, yes,
Yeah, so
great.
good. So
And
good.
Robert De Niro was good as always, but I felt like that was the time when he started to become the stereotypical gangster. Because before he was doing a lot of different characters, but then starting from Goodfellas onwards, he pretty much was the same, in my opinion.
Sure. I
Pretty
can
much
see
the same in everything that he's been ever since Goodfellas. And I can't forget Joe Pesci and his "How Am I Funny" scene.
Yes.
That's the best scene from the movie. Like, you think I'm funny? Do I amuse
Right.
you? Am I some sort of
Right.
clown to you?
So good.
Yeah.
Great
But
stuff.
there's just so much good in it. The vivid
Yeah.
color palette. I
Mhm.
love the one-shot tracks, the memorable retro music, and the trajectory of the film makes it one heck of a ride for me.
Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah. Like I said before, it really has a great energy to it and really does grab your attention, doesn't let go. We got to mention Thelma Schoonmaker again because her
Mhm.
editing really is a highlight of a lot of these movies because, like I said, a lot of them are longer. A lot of them are over 2 hours, 2.5 to, close to three. Some of them are over three. So yeah, her work can't really be overstated because it is so important that when you are telling a big story of someone's life or big events that happen that you really keep the audience's attention and that all comes down to editing, really does. It's really the primary goal. They say movies are made three times: when you write it, when you shoot it, then when you edit it. So it's kind of like the final making of the movie. And
Mhm.
if the edit doesn't work, the movie kind of falls apart. It infamously happened with George Lucas, the original Star Wars. When he screened it for his buddies, it was like, doesn't really work. And then Marsha Lucas, his wife, came in and re-edited the film and made it work. So
Yeah.
yeah, so her contributions to Scorsese, it's obviously why he's worked with her over the past, I think 2 decades on every movie he's made, is because she's very talented and
For
really
sure.
understands what he wants out of the film, and they kind of see eye to eye on those things. So excellent pick for your number two. We're on to our number ones, folks. This is it. Number
Yeah.
one, favorite Martin Scorsese movies. I'm gonna kick us off with the film that did not make your top five. It is Raging Bull from 1980. Dude, I find this to
Figured.
be his greatest work. I think this is not only Scorsese's greatest work, I think it's De Niro's greatest work as an actor. I think their teaming on this is just one of a kind. This rarely happens where a director and an actor come together to create a story on screen that just comes to life in a way that few other films do. Like you were saying earlier, I'm so glad you mentioned the cinematography. The black and white gives it such a, like you said, a documentary type feel. It just grounds the film so much more than if it were in color.
Mhm.
And so for those reasons, obviously you mentioned Pesci, these two playing brothers is just a perfect pairing. I think it's Pesci's most underrated role. This doesn't get talked about a lot. Like people
True.
talk
Yeah.
about this movie, they talk about De Niro, but Pesci is just fantastic in every scene. I mean, the way they play off each other is perfect. Um, Again, the fact that it's a true story, this, Jake LaMotta, what he went through, what he did to people around him. I mean, he fought himself as much as other people inside and outside the ring. I mean, his family fell apart, he kind of just destroyed his life essentially. And that's really what this is. It's a cautionary tale, like a lot of these films are. Goodfellas is kind of that. And so it's a very, I feel like it's a very important movie. It's definitely impactful in the way it portrays this guy's life. It doesn't hold anything back, which I'm glad. A lot of these kind of biopics try to kind of sterilize these people's lives and showcase the good more than the bad, but this showcases all of it. It's a very matter of fact and from what I can tell, very historically accurate film. Cinematography, again, not just the use of black and white, but the camera movement. The opening shot alone is one of my favorite shots in movies. All of it just works so well. Again, he's using music very well throughout the film, very well edited. He uses slow motion very effectively here as well, which can be overused or underused if it's not used correctly. To me, here he's using it very, very sparingly and just very well to showcase the violence and to showcase again what's going on in LaMotta's head and in whatever scene we're going through. So all of that works really well. A lot of cool POV shots here I found to be very interesting because they do as much as you can. They try to make us understand Jake LaMotta throughout the movie and kind of the way he's viewing things. Like he'll see his wife like talk to some guy, and from his perspective, it looks like he's hitting on her, or she's having an affair with this other guy, and so he'll burst out into anger. And so in those sorts of ways, they really do help us kind of get into his mind a little bit, even though I don't think they're holding back. Again, this guy was pretty much a monster throughout his whole life, to all those around him. But it's just very interesting the way they utilize the camera and kind of helping the audience understand him a little bit. There's another great oneer going from the locker room all the way into the ring. He uses a steady cam on that shot. It just looks great again. He's really, really good at those types of things, but always uses them well to kind of tell the story. So yeah, Raging Bull for me, from the first time I saw it, I was just kind of blown away, and I continue to be every time I watch it. Watched it again this week with the commentary on, and it was quite an experience. So yeah, Raging Bull, I have it at my number one spot. I've got the Blu-ray. There is now a 4K Criterion edition, which I really want to get, that I don't have yet. But over to you, Ben. Give us your number one Martin Scorsese movie.
Like the movies that came before, it was really hard to place these in their particular spots. But I just had to ask myself. I gave myself a theoretical question for each filmmaker that I admire. If I had to choose one film and one film alone to remember them by, what would I choose? If it was Steven Spielberg, it would probably obviously be Raiders of the Lost Ark. If it was Francis Ford Coppola, it would have to be The Godfather. If it was George Lucas, A New Hope, probably. I know people would say, why not Empire? He didn't do Empire. That was Irvin Kershner.
Right.
But if I had to choose one film to describe Martin Scorsese and what he's all about and what he likes to explore and how he likes to present actions, it has to be Taxi Driver.
Nice.
I love how he explores the main character of Travis, that he suffers from PTSD. He's just trying to fit in, even though his lifestyle outside being a taxi driver is pretty much a messed up life.
Yeah.
And then as people start to leave him, he just starts to go insane. He's like, I don't like this. I hate this so much. I wanna hit someone. I want to hit it hard.
Yeah.
And
are you talking to me?
You're going to actually feel relieved after doing it, but once it's presented, you realize it doesn't bring anything, So you find yourself wind up in this psychological circle where things are constantly going to be hell, beat after beat after beat.
Yeah. Right.
And the ending took me by surprise. I thought it was going to go one way, but it ended up another way, which I'm like, oh, okay. All right. That's the ending to Taxi Driver. But
right.
Yeah. De Niro's best performance, in my opinion, since Godfather Part 2. Yet I will say his performance in Raging Bull was really good. Yeah, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Godfather Part 2, I would say, are my top 3 favorite performances from Robert De Niro.
Yeah.
So.
Excellent pick. Yeah, I've got this one on Blu-ray too. This 40th anniversary edition. Got tons of bonus features on it, interviews, commentaries, and so I did get to listen to the commentary on this one as well this week. And yeah, it was definitely considered for my top 5. It's another one of those that would easily make the top 10. And so yeah, it's a unnerving performance from De Niro. Absolutely incredible. Harvey Keitel's great in it. Of course, a young Jodie Foster is in there too. So a great supporting cast. Yeah. And Albert Brooks is there. Sybil Shepherd. I mean, it's just got a great cast. Very well shot. Another one where he's utilizing music very well, and shows a side of New York City that exists, but not one that I want to experience for very long. But it's just a great film, and it all these films kind of are taken from Scorsese and his background, growing up in New York at that time and in these neighborhoods, and kind of seeing a lot of this kind of crazy stuff as he was growing up. And cinema was his escape. And that's kind of how he became, a filmmaker and pursued that path against the odds, certainly. So, well, thanks again, Ben, for joining me. This was a great conversation. I think the audience hopefully will really enjoy this. Let us know your top 5 in the comments below. We really want to know what your favorite Scorsese movies are. Again, if you got to see Killers of the Flower Moon, give us your review. Follow us on Letterboxd. Those links are in the description below. Thank you for joining us on this episode. Make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. A lot more podcasts are coming up in the future. A lot of big movies coming out the rest of the year. We are going to be discussing some new reviews. I'm going to do some more Blu-ray reviews in the coming days. So be on the lookout for that. Ben, thanks again for joining me, man.
It's always a pleasure, Cameron. Thank you so much for bringing me on here.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. And we will see you next time right here on The Real World.